Hey there gamers, welcome back to the Board Game Co channel, and today we have a preview of Starline Hill. Hey there gamers, it's Professor Meg here, and welcome back to the Board Game Co channel. Today we have a preview of Starline Hill by Autumn Garden. Now this is a current Kickstarter campaign, so you can check out the link down below, and this is a sponsored preview, but with that in mind, please know that this is all a prototype copy, so all of these components are meant to be upgraded in the final version. I do know that they plan on making many changes. As you can see, these are 3D printed, and one thing I also want to note is this box is very much a prototype type box, so just know that everything you can see that they have planned is in the link down below. It's all very special, and they have some nice things planned. For example, these stars that you see are going to be like semi-see-through, I believe. So things like that you can check out. Now that being said, Starline Hill is going to be a game for 2 players where you are strategically placing out your stars in the sky. Now you're doing this to be able to make different constellations, and the player with the most points worth of constellations at the end of the game is going to win. Now that might seem simple, and at the beginning of the game it is pretty easy to start placing out your stars and working toward these constellations. Now that being said, everyone's working toward shared constellations, so everyone's working toward the same thing at the same time, and you know exactly what the other player is doing. But once you start placing out these constellations, they're going to become neutral stars, and then you're going to be able to draw lines and create more and more stars very quickly, where you're able to chain this. So I'll show you all of that in a moment, but this game can get very, very strategic very quickly, and it's going to be one of those games where all of a sudden the decisions that you're making could really make or break what happens, and you really don't want to make any mistakes at all, where this is going to be a very strategic 2-player game. Now here you have the board for Starline Hill, and you can see that we are a few turns in. So there is a red player and a yellow player. There are only 2 players in this game, and here are those constellations that everyone is working toward. Now they are first come, first served, so once they are claimed, they are claimed by that player to be points for them at the end of the game. So it can be very important to watch what other players are going for, and I'm going to show you a few setup examples here. But just know that this is very early in the game, where you are first out just placing the different stars within the sky. Now when a player does that on their turn, they're going to take one of these neutral star pieces and first place that down, and then they're going to take a star of their color. So on a player's turn you have 2 options. I'll get into the other option in a second after I walk you through this current example, but your first option of doing something is just placing out your star. So it's going to be a neutral star with your star on it, and once you do so at the end of your turn, you are able to claim one of the constellations. Now you can see that this constellation here does meet this this area here, but if a player did not want to do that, for example, this player could have done this and chosen not to claim this constellation at the end of their turn. It's always an option, and this is where you may want to wait and decide what you might be able to do, and perhaps even open up to this stronger one here, but they do see that the other player is going for that, so they may choose not to. So knowing that they have an option of both of these on their next turn, they would perhaps place this star here and then choose to claim this constellation. So when that happens, the player is going to claim back all of the stars of their particular color, but the neutral stars are going to stay in play. So these are placed stars within the sky, and we'll get into exactly what that'll mean in a moment, but the player will also claim this card to be points for them at the end of the game. That's what players are going to add up to see who will be the winner. Now, once that is claimed by the yellow player, a new constellation would immediately come out to be available. So here you can see this is another 8-point constellation with a bit of a different area where perhaps the red player couldn't really configure into this, but sometimes you might hope to do so if you had something set up. But they're already set up to be able to do this, so on the red player's turn, they would then place over here. So this is very important to show you, is they would be able to place for this area, and you are able to rotate the card, but you are not able to reverse or do the mirror side. So you are able to rotate it, and you can see that we are able to do it this way if we would like. So we're able to put a star out here, do this, and then claim this constellation for the red player instead at the end of that turn. And then again, a new constellation would come out that players are able to claim. Now, what you just saw is very typical for the beginning of the game, because players are going to have to put out their initial stars to be able to place stars into the sky, and then they'll be able to score those different constellations. But the other action that players are able to do on their turn is drawing a line. So I'm going to fast forward us a few turns in the sky, and then I'm going to show you what drawing a line is going to look like. Alright, so now that we are a little bit further forward in time, the red and yellow players have taken a few turns of placing out their stars. Now again, they are placing out stars on empty spaces in the sky where they have to place a neutral star and then their own player star on top of it. Now you can see that they've done it a few places on the board, and now they're able to do an action called drawing a line. Now you're able to do this whenever you meet the conditions, which I'm going to show you in a moment, but you're able to do it without having to have all of these stars out. I just wanted to fast forward us a bit so you can see this action happen a few times in a row. So once you have neutral stars that are encased between two of your player stars, you are able to draw a line. Now it can only be neutral stars in between, and there can't be any empty sky or other player stars in that area in between. So the yellow player could now choose to draw a line between this area. So they're able to place out 3 of their stars, and that's going to give them a whole lot more control on the board. You can see that how you can set up these different lines is going to really determine how many stars you're able to get at once and how many you're able to place out. Now, players are limited to 15 stars, so you do have to watch out what you're doing and what you're placing, but with that in mind, these drawing lines are really going to let you escalate what you're doing in the game. Now, the red player may choose to do the same thing, seeing how cool that looked, and this is a really big line for them, so they may choose to fill this line next, and they would do the same thing by taking their color player stars and filling them in all of the empty neutral stars. Now, for an example, if this area had already looked like this, it would take you 2 separate turns to fill in this line, because this player star interrupts this area. So if you did want to fill this, you would have to first fill drawing one line there, and then drawing another line there. Another option would be if that player built out a constellation with this, claimed a constellation, took that token off, and then that would free up that area for you to be able to draw a line in the future. So those would kind of be the options of what you would want to do if that area was more clogged up on you when you wanted to draw lines. Now you can see this yellow player already set themselves up for another line, and they weren't able to do that before because this piece was not here. So this is really clever where they're able to now place out another piece, and they may choose to draw a line in this area, especially because this is already public information where the red player might be anticipating that they would do that, and currently that doesn't really have them veering toward any new shapes that might be available, kind of giving them an idea of what they might be going for. Now, the red player, again, having a pretty good move here, might choose to fill that area, or they might choose to assess this at that point and see what they're able to do. Now, they are able to claim the 3 in a row, but that's not the strongest when there are 2 8s out here, and honestly, working towards one of these is probably their best bet. So they may choose to fill in and draw their line just to kind of pass and see what their opponent starts working toward, where they may want to work toward either of those. They might see what the yellow player chooses to do next. And the yellow player might choose to work toward this constellation card because they almost have this shape right over here. So they may choose to place one of their stars yet again over here in this area, and then they're going to have completed this constellation card. They'll take this one as well to be able to score, and then once again this area will be wiped of its stars, leaving it free to be having lines drawn up against it, and again this player will have all of these stars back to hopefully populate out in the sky, and a new constellation will come out. Now, in Starline Hill, the game is going to end in one of 2 ways. Now, the first way is going to be if both players choose to pass in succession. So if both players choose to pass, then the game will immediately end, meaning be very careful if you choose to pass if you are below in points, because your opponent may choose to pass and win the game immediately. But that being said, the other way to win the game is once the sky is completely filled with all stars, at least neutral stars, and there are no places left to place a neutral star in the sky, you will then stop drawing constellations. So the game doesn't end immediately. Players are still able to work toward the constellations that are already available, but you won't draw anymore. And once all of the constellations are gone, that's when the game will end. Players will add up their points from the different stars that they've been able to make, and we'll see who wins. Starline Hill is going to be a highly strategic game for two players where you are playing head to head, trying to figure out these different shapes and honestly what you are able to block off your opponent from being able to get. As I said, the limited number of stars can make it very tricky because you're going to have to choose between a really good move and where you are able to line something up versus what you really need to do to try to conform to these different constellations, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how many stars you have out in the sky, it matters how many constellations you've made and been able to bank for yourself. So it is constantly going to be a push and pull of what you're able to set up and be able to see for yourself, block your opponent off from the things that they're choosing to do, but ultimately really keeping an eye on these different shapes and what you need to accomplish, because this is going to be the goal of the game. Overall, Starline Hill is going to be one of those abstract two-player games that is pretty simple in rule set, where you can understand all of the moves and you are working within this controlled space, but it's highly, highly strategic. It can start off a little bit slow where you're able to get out a few stars out, but then after that it's really going to be a free-for-all for these shared constellations, because the fact that they're shared means that both players are working toward them, and where you only have two players, it's a very, very tight space. And you're going to be trying to block off your opponent, but also trying to build out the constellations that you need, and you're working with a limited number of stars to be able to do so. So once those lines that you were able to draw really start cropping up and giving you these really, really big moves, you're going to be able to score some really, really high points for these different constellations that come out. I didn't even show you all of them, but there are some that score very, very highly. Here's 13 points, 13. So you saw a couple 8s out here, but there are some that can get very, very high for players. So, you know, a couple more 5s in here. That these are all the constellations. So it will be a constant push and pull of what constellations you're trying to build up. Perhaps you're going for a bunch of these smaller point ones, or you're trying to keep your eye out for those big ones, because you can have a lot of stars out to be able to score those. So you can check out the Kickstarter link down below for everything that is planned for Starline Hill. Thank you to Autumn Garden for sponsoring this video. I'm Professor Meg, and I will see you all next time. Bye!